All right, let's get to it. Let's take this BBSO2 off of this white bike, and then we will get this BBSHD on here. So this one is the 100mm bottom bracket, and that was the 68. So we've been running this. One thing I want to do is measure from, let's just say, from that tube to the center of the chain, got about 55mm. So kind of experimented with a couple of different offsets on that sprocket, and this turned out to be a good place for it. So hopefully we can duplicate that location of the chain ring. We got two to choose from. This is the one that came with it, and then this is a one that I had from another BBSHD build that I didn't end up using. So let me get that thing upside down, and then we'll talk some more. All right, so we got it upside down. I just unplugged the wires, took the kickstand off, and then we can get a look at this. So this bike, this is the bottom bracket, and this bike, this was 100mm long. I happen to have this 68mm BBSO2, so to make it fit, I cut off as much as I could off of this end before it was getting into that weld, and as much off of that end, so it was symmetric, and now it is 73mm. And you can see how this nut fit on, but you know, these kits actually have a lock nut that goes on top. Wasn't able to get that on. So these crank arms are the crank arms that came with this Mongoose Kong bike. And on this side, it had a sprocket connected to it. I cut it off. So you can see that when we use these, this one is that close to the frame, and this one is farther. So the pedals weren't centered in the frame. But you know what? You can't tell. You couldn't tell by riding, right? Also, you can see how this is a HPC chainring adapter to a 104mm bolt pattern sprocket. And then I did experiment, ended up shimming that, where now we measured this chain being 55mm from the outside of that seat post. So we're going to try to get it back there. I do run, this is just a big hose clamp that's around here. I did cover it with heat shrink, and then there is another one that goes through that and around this tube, and that just keeps it from, so when the motor torques, it is trying to push the motor against the tube. But I did have these sometimes loosen up from bouncing around, and it would fall down, and then when you gave it throttle, it would slam against the tube. So I'm just using a couple hose clamps all the time. All right, so we're gonna take the crank arms off, and we're gonna pull the BBSO2. So the pedals on the chainring side, if you don't know, the chainring side, the right side of the bike, chainring side, is threaded the way you would normally thread things, right? Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. But on the opposite side, the pedal is lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. So we'll get those off, then we'll take this fastener out, and we'll use a tool to pull those crank arms. So let's do that real quick. Okay, so we got it out of there. Here you can see this tube extended out here about, right now it's 72, so it was 100, which means that's 28mm shorter, so it's 14mm on each side. which is just over a half inch. Half inch is 12.7. So I had cut off as much as I can, getting right to that weld. Then I also had to take a little ball peen hammer and put this little indentation here and this indentation here. Now that was to put the BBSO2 onto this Kong, right? Now the 100mm bottom bracket BBSHD, I think it will go right on. So what I'm going to do is, let me try putting it, oh, here's the comparison. This is, you can see the size difference in these motors, right? Now this is, this runs at 30 amps and this is 25. It's only a 5 amp difference, but it has a lot more meat, right? So it has a lot more thermal mass. If we find that this doesn't have as much horsepower as we're hoping, then we're gonna put a different controller on it and jam more juice into it. This thing, if we tried that, it wouldn't last very long. They're just not very robust. So we'll use some shims I got from McMaster-Carr, and what I'll do is I'll make a stack of 14mm thick, and we'll put this guy in there and see what it would be like if you were doing this at home and you took a stock Mongoose Kong and just threw this on there. Would it just bolt on? And what would your chain line be like? Okay, so let me do that and we'll come back. All right, well, good news. So this is a stack of 14mm of shims there, 14mm of shims there, restoring this to the 100mm bracket. So if you were doing this, you know, this tube would just extend all the way to there. This would fit perfectly with no interference, no need to dimple that like I had to. No need to dimple this like I had to for the BBSO2 installation. So it's like a slam dunk, right? Now, this is the chainring that comes with it, and I'm measuring it at about 50mm. So it's about 5mm off of what I would consider ideal, right? But we could put a shim underneath that just a little bit to space it out, and they make a variety of other ones of these. Actually, let's try the other chainring real quick. Okay, so this is a optional chainring that I bought from Lunicycles, and Lunicycles is where I got the BBSHD, the BBSO2, all that stuff. Now when I measure it, we're at 60mm. So with this one, it's 5mm more to the outside than ideal, and with the other one, it's 5mm to the inside. Now, with this power, you're never going to be using first gear, so I would use this one to move it outside, and you'll be using the higher gears. This is a 42 tooth chain ring, and it will accept any of these 5-bolt chain rings that are on road bikes. So we'll probably end up experimenting with a 46 on that. Now, the other thing is the cranks. So here's some cranks, right? Now, if you bought a BBSHD kit, so I bought just the, what they call bare bones. So it only came with that chain ring, nothing else. If you bought the whole kit, it would come with crank arms. Those crank arms would be 170mm long, so that's like for a full-size bike. If you tried to put those on this bike, you'd be having pedal strikes. They'd be way too low. They're too long. So these are the cranks that came on this bike. This one had a sprocket attached, and I just cut it off. So we can see what the Q factor is. So you can see the way they were offset. This side is wider than the other, right? So it's not centered. But again, I've never noticed that. Now, that being said, I did buy these cranks a while back, and if you, these are the same length, 6 inches, but no offset. So these, if you Google unicycle cranks, you know, that's what you get in a variety of lengths. So what you could do is use that one, and then they're even. So if you wanted to do that, what I'm going to do is, since my bottom bracket is so narrow, and I can, oops, sorry about that, and I can move these shims around, I'm going to use straight cranks, and I'm going to move these shims until this is centered. Probably move it 5 millimeters so that, and use this chain ring so that I have the chain ring in the right spot and these guys are centered. So we'll have 5 millimeters less here, 5 millimeters more there. It'll be pretty close. And what I think I will do is I actually have these unicycle cranks, and these guys are super short, so they're even shorter, and they're black, so they're aluminum, whatever. But hopefully I'm going to find out that with a BBSHD power, right, some short cranks will be sweet. So let me rearrange these shims, and then I'm probably gonna, you can see how this chain ring, this snout on the BBSHD still sticking out. I have a shim where I can put underneath this. So I think I'll rearrange these shims, put a shim under this, and I think what we'll end up with is cranks that are centered with the chain ring in the right position. We'll add a strap to this like I like to do and bolt her down, see what we get. I'll be back. Once our hose clamps look professional, put a little heat shrink on it, hit it with that heat gun. Oh yeah, baby. Okay, man, so it turned out freaking sweet. Right, so here's what we did. We moved shims from this side over to here, and that allows me to use these really stubby crank arms that are straight and have the narrowest Q factor, right, because they're both straight. And we got about a finger there, about a finger there. So it's even up, and when I measure this, I have one shim underneath this chain ring, but it still has full engagement with the snout there, and it is 55 millimeters. So everything is exactly where we want it to be. So we'll put the kickstand back on. We'll flip it over, see what it looks like. All right, so pretty badass actually, except for those washers look hideous, man. They need to be black or something. So we'll have to cover those up or take it apart and paint them, do something. Other than that minor setback, I think we're looking good. So this has one more connector. So it has Anderson connectors. I've got a jumper to go to the XT90 that I have for our batteries. I think I explained before that I have eliminated the display, and this, I modified this wire, and it goes just to the throttle. So the way it works, this one works, is when you plug this in, it is on, and it has one mode. So I'm not sure if the settings in this controller are compatible with what I got going on. So what we'll end up doing is I do have a display. Let's go ahead and wire it up to the display and get the laptop out here and see what the settings are in there, and just try to run the motor first, all stock, just in case there's a problem, we gotta return it or something. This does have one more connector, this guy right here, and this is for a gear sensor. So these newer ones have a sensor that when you put something on the shifter, and when that cable goes tight, it senses and lets off on the throttle. None of that stuff applies to us. This, and we're just going to do wheelies. That's the plan. So no commuting, no, just get out there and get that front wheel in the air. So, all right, well, that's it for this one, and we will make another video with wiring it up, checking the settings, and then maybe one after that. We'll see what it does. And then, of course, that BBSO2 will go on that bike, and we will do it all again. Oh, yeah, let's, onto the white bike, we're going to upgrade the rear brake. So, one change at a time. We order events, we run this motor, then we see what kind of power it's got. Then we upgrade the rear brake, and then we decide if we're going to put the Kelly controller on it. If we decide that it doesn't have quite enough ass, then we will probably wait on the Kelly controller and get the BBSO2 on this. And then there's always this bike here, which is a Cyclone and a Kelly KLS 7212, which I never could get running with this motor, but I figured it out. So, all right, guys, see ya.